Hi folks, Dr. Jenkins here. We're going to go over the second part of the inductive argument chapter. Let me share the screen with you. Okay. Okay, remember, inductive arguments are arguments that have the pattern that if the premises are true, they lend support to the probability of the conclusion. Okay, so arguments by analogy are arguments that make use of an analogy, which is reasoning between two or more things that are similar in some respects, so they must be similar in some further respect. So say you have a thing A that has three properties plus a fourth property. And then you have another thing, B, that has three properties. The argument by analogy will say, since both of these things have these three relevant properties in common, they probably have this fourth property as well. So judging arguments by analogy depend on having relevant similarities, how many dissimilarities there are, how many different instances are compared, and a diversity of different kinds of cases. So if you're comparing two wars, probably on some property between two wars may have some force, but probably fairly weak. Would make a fairly weak argument if you're trying to compare in terms of relevant properties, and then one of them you're going to say has some further property. If you're comparing a lot of wars, that's a diversity of cases. So the more cases you have, the stronger your argument will be, most likely. Now, the other kind of argument that we talked about in this chapter are causal arguments. That's where we're trying to argue one thing causes another. Now, this is used a lot in science, obviously. So some confusions about whether one thing causes another that a lot of people make is they misidentify relevant factors. They overlook relevant factors. They confuse a coincidence with a cause. The book did a good job of explaining how we may be thinking about our friend and then they call us out of the blue. A lot of coincidences happen just because they call us out of the blue and we were thinking about them. Doesn't mean that our thinking about them caused them to call. In fact, coincidences, the way there are so many different things that happen in the world, coincidences are going to happen. It's not just that they're likely to happen. There's going to be a lot of things that happen that are just pure coincidence. And then some folks confuse the cause with just the order that things happen. You know, one thing happens before another. Also confusing cause and effect happens as well. In causal arguments, another couple of concepts that are important are necessary and sufficient conditions. When you have a condition that its occurrence, if the occurrence of a condition will necessarily lead to something happening, then you have a necessary condition. If you have a condition whereby it will happen, but it's not necessary that this event will happen because of the conditions, then you have a sufficient conditions. Of course, you have some things that one thing happens and they're necessary. It's necessary for one thing to happen. There's a lot of good examples in the book. There's some things that cause other things. There's conditions that are sufficient, and there's some things that are necessary and sufficient. There are also cases where there are neither necessary or sufficient conditions where one thing causes another. If I say drop this pen on the desk in front of me, my letting go of the pen certainly caused the pen to hit the desk, but a lot of other reasons could have caused this to hit the desk. Somebody could have come in and pushed it onto here. There could have been an earthquake. most likely somebody else would have could have come in and done the same thing, dropped it on here. My letting it go was neither a necessary, although now that I think of it, it was a sufficient condition of the pen hitting the desk. That is, along with gravity and the weight of the pen. So let's look at some of the homeworks. 8.6. 8.6 says, okay, let's do number 6. No. Yes. My brother was always good at arithmetic, so he'll be a whiz at algebra. Oh, let me read what we're doing here. Evaluate each of the following passages and indicate whether it contains A, an argument by analogy, B, a literary analogy, or C, an enumerating induction. If the passage contains an argument by analogy, indicate the total number of things being compared, the relevant similarities, the conclusion, and whether the argument is strong or weak. So this is definitely an argument by analogy. Two things are being compared here. It looks like the brother is good at numbers, in arithmetic, so it'll probably be really good at algebra. So that's what seems to be compared. There's two things being compared. Again, the relevant similarities are the numbers or the math that's being done. The conclusion is he'll be a whiz at algebra, and it looks like a weak argument to me. So two things are compared. The relevant similarity is working with numbers or math. He'll be a whiz at algebra is the conclusion. It's an inductive argument, so it's a weak inductive argument. The analogy between these two things gives weak evidence for the likelihood of the claim or the conclusion. He'll be a whiz at algebra. Okay? Let's look at number 8. Number 8, I like sausage, I like ham, I like pork chops, so I will like chitlins. Okay, chitlins are chitterlings, they're pig intestines. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you know that. But they're comparing things to eat, and that's fine, or pork, or, they're comparing pig products and how much the speaker likes them, so they think they'll probably like chitlins. Certainly it is an argument by analogy. The relevant similarities are food that the person likes or something like that. What was the total number of things? This is what, 4 things. The conclusion is that I will like chitlins, and it seems like a pretty strong argument to me. If you like pork in a lot of forms, why wouldn't you like pork in another form? So 4 things being compared, being pork, okay. The conclusion, I will like chitlins, and they say it's a weak argument. Weak, strong, I don't care. That's not a huge thing. I want you to get the concepts of these. So how many of them you get exactly right, not a big deal. But you do need to get enough of them right to demonstrate that you understand the concepts. 8.7. Evaluate each of the following arguments by analogy, indicate a whole bunch of things. So let's see. Former President Reagan and President Bush is like former President Ronald Reagan, President George W. Bush is a staunch conservative, has strong Christian values, and adheres almost dogmatically to certain conservative principles. Okay, so they're alike in all those things. So here's the 4th thing, right? President Reagan allowed his fierce fidelity to his principles and values to lead him into a foreign policy disaster, right? Contra. President Bush will likely be involved in a similar foreign policy mess for similar reasons. So what are the things being compared? Well, there are 2 presidents being compared. They're both conservative, and they're, these are the things being compared to these 2 presidents, Bush and Reagan. The relevant similarities are that they're both staunch conservatives, they both have Christian values, and so on. Is the diversity of cases a significant factor? There's only 2 things, 2 people being compared. So the cases, when it says a case, it means the things that are being compared, not the characteristics of the things, not the properties, but the things. So Reagan versus George Bush, right? Those are the diversity of cases. So the more of those, the stronger the analogy. What's the conclusion? The conclusion is President Bush will likely be involved, blah, blah, blah. And is the argument strong or weak? It seems pretty weak, just because they're alike on these. Possibly, maybe these are relevant. I don't know. I'm not sure that these would be that relevant. But even if they were relevant similarities between the two, certainly there are going to be many other dissimilarities. So let's see what we got. The personality traits are being compared of two presidents. The relevant similarities are those things that we mentioned. There's a diversity of cases, not a significant factor. Okay, that's what we thought too. There's the conclusion, and it's a weak argument because there are some unmentioned dissimilarities. Okay, here we go. Homework 8.8. Let's see. 8.8. Analyze each of the following causal arguments. Identify the conclusion and whether the argument appeals to the method of agreement, the method of difference, the joint method of agreement, difference, or correlation. In some cases, the conclusion may be implied but not stated. Indicate whether the argument is strong or weak. Okay, so let's go back and look at the methods of difference and all that. Agreement. So let's just bring it back to here for a second. The method of agreement is if two or more occurrences of a phenomenon have only one relevant factor in common. Okay, so two or more occurrences of something have only one factor in common. If they only have one factor in common, then according to the method of agreement, that factor must be the cause. This isn't an absolute law or anything. This is just a method. This is just one way to sort of sidle up to the possibility that something is a cause. If there's one thing that two things have in common, that could be the cause. Probably the weakest of all these methods. Okay. And then they give the example of, let's say there's only one relevant factor in common between people who got sick, that they all drank from the same bottle of wine. Okay, so that's the method of agreement. The method of difference says that the relevant factor the relevant factor present when a phenomenon occurs and absent when the phenomenon does not occur is likely the cause. So here we look for factors that are points of difference among the instances. So this is a little bit stronger. Right? Now, both agreement and difference would be identifying the relevant factors common to occurrences and discard any of these that are present even when there are no occurrences. And the correlation is the method that says when two events are correlated, they're probably causally related. Now, correlation, of course, is when two things vary together. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. So research suggests that eating lots of fruits and vegetables may provide some protection against several types of cancer. Studies have revealed that the risk of getting cancer associated with the lowest intakes of fruits and vegetables is twice as high as that associated with the highest intakes. This association holds for several types of cancer, including breast, colon, pancreas, and bladder. Okay. So let me look at that again. Research suggests that eating lots of fruits and vegetables may provide some. So that's the claim. The claim is that eating lots of fruits and vegetables may provide protection against cancer. The studies have revealed that the risk of getting cancer associated with the lowest intakes of fruits and vegetables is twice as high. Association. Okay. Of course, I typed all this stuff in here, and I don't remember what the answer to this one is. So I'm going to guess that this is correlation because there seems to be a correlation here is what they're talking about. The studies have revealed that the risk of getting cancer associated, something about association, that word sort of Because you're just talking an association. A simple association is that whenever one thing happens, something else happens. So, you know, your associate, you know, is somebody who's always with you, or is a peer, somebody who is always around. So this association holds for several types. So let's see what we got. Okay, so we're supposed to figure out the conclusion, and that's that research suggests eating lots of fruits and vegetables may provide protection, cancer. Correlation, and the argument is strong because there's this association. Okay, and it's a limited claim, and the stated correlation could easily support it. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff we're looking for that one. Now, 8.10 is the last little section. 8.10 says, for each of the following causal statements, indicate whether the specified cause is A, a necessary condition, B, a sufficient condition, C, a necessary and sufficient condition, or B, neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition. So we're going to do 4 of these. All the 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so this is 3 starred ones and then 1 sort of bonus one in here that's non-starred. Okay, so we're looking for causal conditions, or conditions that might cause the thing. So these are all causal statements. We don't have to, we don't have to figure out if they are causal statements or not. We're told that they're causal statements. So Sylvia's being exposed to the influenza virus caused her to get the flu, okay? Being exposed to the influenza virus caused her to get the flu. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, is it necessary, sufficient, necessary and sufficient, or neither, that her being exposed to the virus caused her to get the flu? So to figure out if it is a necessary condition, we ask, is it necessary that one be exposed to the virus in order to get the flu? Could one get the flu any other way? Well, being exposed in some way or another, even if somebody sneaks up behind you and drops it in, you know, your food or something, or gives you a shot when you're not looking, you're being exposed to it. So it seems that there's a necessary condition here. Is it sufficient? Is being exposed to the influenza virus sufficient to get the flu? Well, could there be other ways? Oh, let me see. Is it sufficient? Necessary? Is it sufficient? I wonder if you already had the flu, if you were immune to it, for instance, if you had a flu shot, or just you had some immunity to this particular influenza virus, maybe you wouldn't get the flu. So maybe it's not sufficient to be exposed to it. It's necessary to get it, but maybe there's some other things that have to happen for it to be sufficient. So for instance, maybe that you are properly allergic or something like that to this influenza virus. And since it is necessary, it can't be neither. And since it's not sufficient, it can't be both. So it's necessary. Okay, so the answer to this one is necessary. Let's do the next one. Sergio's eagerness to get to the airport. Oh, Sergio, he's so eager to get to the airport, caused him to get a speeding ticket. Oh boy. So his eagerness to get to the airport caused him to get a speeding ticket. Okay, Sergio's eagerness to get to the airport. Well, a lot of people are eager to get to the airport, but they don't get a speeding ticket. So it doesn't seem to be necessary. It's not necessary to get a speeding ticket that you're eager. Is it sufficient to be eager to get a ticket? No, I mean, you can be eager to get to the airport, and again, you wouldn't. It's not enough. It's not enough. One way to say necessary is that it has to be there. The condition has to be this way in order for the event to happen. The cause has to be there in order for the event to happen, and that's what necessary means. And sufficient means that it's enough. Is the cause enough to make it happen? And it seems to be neither. Okay, very good. It's neither one. So chopping off the head of the king put an end to him. Certainly, it did put an end to him, so it was sufficient. You chop off a king's head, it will be the end of the king, at least in the current state of scientific medicine. Is it necessary to put an end to somebody to chop off their head? No, it doesn't seem to be necessary, but it is sufficient, so we're going to say sufficient. And it is a sufficient condition. Finally, a single spark started the internal combustion engine. A single spark. A single spark started the internal combustion engine. I don't really understand internal combustion engines that much. I think there has to be a spark, so I think it's necessary. Is it enough? I think there has to be more things going on. I don't know a lot about this, but I think that you can create a spark in a parking lot just by itself, and it would not start up an internal combustion engine. There are several things that have to happen. The engine must be there. The weather conditions had, maybe if it's raining, a single spark wouldn't do it, or something like that. So I'm going to say that it's necessary but not sufficient. Okay, very good. And I believe, yes. So that's all for this one. I hope this has helped you to do the homework for this week. And thank you for watching and listening. Bye-bye.